Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to Artist Talk with Verica Kovacevska. This is the last Artist Talk in the framework of this year's edition of the project Voice. We are going live on Facebook, and this is also being recorded. Also, we have here in Prostor a small audience, so thanks everyone for coming. As usual, before we start, I would just like to ask you to join us at any moment, wherever you feel you have some question or comment. If you are on Zoom, you can ask to join or even write your question in the chat, and also people on Facebook can write their questions or comments in the comment, and then we will read it. So thank you, Verica, for joining us. Verica is an artist from North Macedonia who has been living and working in Zurich, Switzerland for already some time. We invited her already last year to participate in the last year's edition, but eventually we had to postpone that because of everything what was happening with COVID, and it was complicated. But this year,
somehow we managed. Really.
Yeah, although the situation in Switzerland is again getting a little bit complicated for traveling, but we managed to do it. Yes. So Verica has been here for 6 days now, and so she spent the whole week here in our residency in Prostor. Her initial idea was actually to do a project that was really connected to the local context, so to the building and to the neighborhood where Prostor is based. And before even she came here, we started to talk about it. We were doing some online research, providing with some materials, and so on. And the work should have been somehow also related to the context of your previous work, because you have been known to have worked in public space, in participatory projects that include also local community. So I thought that tonight we should maybe start by giving some background to your practice. So Verica will do a small presentation about some of her previous projects and how it actually led her to the idea of what to do with this building that we are based in, and how she actually spent last couple of days. So Verica, I give you the floor. Thank you again for joining us. We hope that it was a nice week here.
It was.
So tell us, how did you start to be interested in the public space area, and how did you start to work with participatory projects? I imagine that it was quite different from context to context and from community to community.
So I've been working for a long time now in public space. I kind of started one of my first projects in public space already at university. So and
that was in UK, right?
And that was in the UK.
I'm just giving like the context.
Yes. So yes,
because I guess. I mean, I'm not guessing. I am sure that the working in public space in UK, in Switzerland, and in Split, it's quite different.
It's very, very different, of course.
And in Macedonia as well.
Yes, definitely. So I was always interested to work with space in a site-specific way, and very quickly I moved also to public space on the street. also as a way to see how art could function outside the white cube. And I started with performance, so performing in public space. And that was very interesting. I did like very simple action. I mean, if you want to hear about the very first action,
Definitely.
it was just, you know, like drawing a circle with a chalk around and kind of standing in it, sort of marking my personal space and kind of working with this idea of what is public, what is private space, how that can change from culture to culture. You know, in the UK, people tend to be kind of more distant, whereas in the Balkans, they're kind of closer together. And the fascinating thing with that work was the reaction of the general public, or the audience, who were just complete. So I did it in 3 locations in the UK: in Exeter, where I was studying, in London, and in Edinburgh. And usually in kind of quiet, dense, sort of high street locations. And they were very surprised. They would yell at me. They would kind of point fingers. They would try to take the chalk and I mean, they were very animated. So that was kind of a very interesting experience and kind of a good lesson in a way to realize that when you work in public space, it's completely unsafe. You have no idea what's going to happen. So, and that intrigued me a lot because, yeah, I actually am someone who likes to have kind of control over my work, but you have to realize that you really have to let go. So just to go back to, you know, the idea of coming here and doing something with the local community, when we were talking and you told me that Prostor is like in this really big, very famous modernist building called Kineski Zid, which we will come to I will explain a bit about that for maybe the audience online. I thought, oh, that's kind of great. It's like this community building and I can maybe do something with the residents. And some of them already come here to Prostor and they do workshops together. I saw that you're doing ceramics and, you know, all kinds of like recycling, all kinds of things. And then I was like, I came here and we made an open call for people and so on. Of course, you have to take into account that, you know, it's in the middle of the week and people have work and, you know, they have their lives, but they were not as interested to, let's say, participate, you know, to sit down and, you know, talk to me. The original idea actually was to do walking interviews, which would mean that we would take a walk in the building or around the building and I would get to hear maybe some personal stories about what it's like to live here, things that I can't really find out or, you know, research through books and in different ways. So that didn't quite happen, which is okay. That's how it goes sometimes. And yeah,
I mean, some people really like the idea, and then like they were. How to say, they like the idea, but they didn't want to give a piece of themselves into the idea, you know, like the general idea is great, oh, I would love to do that, but when you really need to, like, I mean, participation is something that I think we really need to still a lot to work on.
Yes.
And especially, like, you know, giving the opportunity to become part of something. It's not really that people are realizing, you know, and this, I mean, this goes far beyond. We can now talk about also like democracy and, you know, how you can be aware that you can actually participate in the society, you know, in the decision making and things, and not to say even in the smaller things that, so we still have to, you know, of course now I'm generalizing, but I think this is like still a process that we are all learning, you know, about how to engage more people, how to really show them they can participate. and also, you know, sharing something personal is always, there is a little bit of the, you know.
Interesting. I didn't actually think about it in that way, that people would be more conscious or reserved about sharing something personal. Or maybe I didn't even perceive it myself as too personal. I was just kind of looking to get an insider perspective as an outsider, because I thought without that I can only really focus on the architecture.
Yeah.
I can't focus on the life of the building, which is in the end what I ended up focusing on the architecture, on the geometry, on like kind of going into the mind of the architect. What was his the original concept? Was he successful? Is the space used in the intended way or not? Is there potential for more, and if so, how? So yeah, I mean, participation, yeah, in every society, in art or outside of art, it can be challenging.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, maybe in some places people are also not as used to participating in art. I don't know. What do you guys think? Or I put you in the spot.
But what you also encounter was this a closure of the building, in a sense that you cannot actually freely like come into, you know, which is also something that we need to take into account if we are doing, you know, what was behind the idea behind was like kind of like put this landmark on a touristic map, you know, so that we can have something in Prostor that is actually, you know, attracting people to visit this part of Split, then to show something that is, you know, outside of the city center, but that is also kind of like pointing off to some void, something that is really missing it. So this is also something that we realize we need to think of, because, you know, if it's the outer space and what you said, like the movement, the perception, the geometry, something that is maybe, you know, more feasible, more doable to do, if people come here and they want to, you know, explore a little bit the area, maybe we should, you know, then focus on some of all other things that are not just inside the building, because, you know, we cannot, you know.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
but that's yeah, I mean, that's why I liked this project so much, and to participate in it. Actually, I've never worked on the topic of tourism so far, so that already attracted me a lot. And tourism has changed so much over the years. We're kind of have gone from like mass tourism to like towards being something more alternative, more intimate, more personal. And of course, the pandemic has changed the concept of tourism a lot. It's like kind of going back to local tourism more, or regional tourism, and less this kind of like jet setting whenever. So yeah, initially when we were talking, that was kind of idea of what can we do that would add to the to the city as well. That is missing. And
actually to point out all the life that's happening also outside of the
outside of the more or less the old town.
Palace,
exactly.
But now we we talked a lot about the project, so let's
take a few steps back.
And maybe you can let us know a little bit more about some of your projects that you find were interesting in this context, you know, kind of like to give us sort of background.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, as you already said, maybe I could move a little bit from this slide. I have worked a lot in public space with performance in a participatory way, and also often using it's not full screen, sorry. Also using different gadgets, different equipment. And one of the earliest projects I did was called the Walking Project, where I would take a walk in a different city, area, and the audience would be in a gallery. This was kind of started with when the first iPhone came out. So it's interesting that the technology is already outdated, even though it's sort of recent-ish. Well, not that's recent anymore. So people could basically follow my movement on a Google map where I'm walking and direct me in the city. And one work, for example, was in Belgrade. I took a walk in New Belgrade, which is also in some ways has some reference also to Spinat, to this kind of high, dense living quarters of the city. And basically what I did, I took a walk there, and the audience could follow my movement on a Google satellite view of New Belgrade, where most of the newer buildings were not visible. So I would take a walk, and every time I would see a new building, I would take a picture and send it to the audience in the gallery. So in that way, we were kind of doing real-time mapping the city. And yeah, that's sort of the first work from Belgrade. Just to show you a couple of different examples.
Do you see the change on Zoom? The change of slide? Okay. Is it full screen there?
We are not fixing the full screen now.
Okay. Okay. I think it's a little bit late here, so don't get confused.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I will just show you. I mean, not to show you all of my works.
Yeah.
I kind of picked three different projects that kind of approach more or less, let's say, the same topic from different angles. So one work was called The House We Grew Up In, which was basically presented on an old slide projector, and it had an audio, and the pictures were of prefabricated houses that were built in the 60s in Skopje after the big earthquake. So just a little context, in 1963 there was a big earthquake in the city which destroyed about 80% of the city, which left many people homeless, of course, and the quickest and cheapest way to home most of these people was to build prefabricated homes, most of which came from Finland, as well as other countries that have some history with prefabrication, like the US, France, and the UK. And so my grandparents had one of these houses, and I know it very well. And I did, so the project was, well, first I did a whole research on why and how they were built and so on. And then afterwards came up with this installation. So I'd like to, if possible, play you the sound, just so you have like a little idea of what the work sounds like. And before I do that, the way the work sort of is experienced is like this slide projector is really also a bit like a sculpture, like an object, you know, it just goes like, it gives you like a nice rhythm. So then when you hear the sound, it all kind of plays well together, let's say, which you don't have if you just see a picture and sound. But, okay, so can I play the sound?
Yeah, you can play.
Oops. Oops, sorry, for some reason.
The house had a
Sorry, do you see it? Yes.
The house had a modest design. It was not considered an architectural gem. After all, it was authorless, factory-made. But it had a Scandinavian look, one that was exotic for the southern region. It was also detached and single-storied and contained a generous garden. My grandfather, who grew up in the south of Macedonia, surrounded by agriculture, loved having a large garden. It was also here that we spent most of our time as children, climbing the trees, picking fresh cherries, collecting flowers, making snowmen, and hiding when things were hard. At the beginning, there was nothing but houses. The nearest school or supermarket was kilometers away. But the house had many peculiarities about it. It came with a fully furnished kitchen and bathroom, which exceeded the local quality and design. It also included a large basement with a separate entrance. Here, one could store a number of things or have more functional space, such as a laundry room or an office. We spent hours in the basement as children, mainly looking for the monsters. Upstairs, all the windows had mosquito nets, something that maybe many houses in Finland have, given the number of lakes there. The handles of all windows were round, which to me as a child resembled a microphone.
So just a little excerpt. This is a bit what we were talking about, you know, the inside, outside, kind of connecting memory and place and yes. And this was another project that I did, which came out from another residency in New York in 2018. I won the Young Visual Artist Award. So I was in New York for 2 months, living in Brooklyn. And I had already done one work before that on the topic of gentrification in Zurich. But once I came to New York, I noticed that it's kind of out of control there. It's on a much larger scale, more aggressive, and you see the level of inequality that exists. Rich, poor, you know, you have like a super luxury building, and next to it, public housing where people like mostly live on, I don't know, $10 per day. A lot of homeless people. So it was kind of interesting to document also all of these contrasts. And the final result of this work was this book, which also in a way works as a kind of an object, a tactile object that you can open and discover by yourself. There it is. So one page always has an older building and one page has a new building, and a map to show how close they're to each other. So the buildings were either literally next to each other on the street or facing each other, which made the whole situation even more absurd. That's the area that I was researching, which was 4 interconnected little neighborhoods, all going along the Atlantic Avenue, which is one of the main streets in Brooklyn. And that's why the book is called Across the Atlantic, because it's kind of like across this Atlantic Avenue, but kind of crossing the Atlantic to come and do this work. These are, for example, some of the pictures from the book. And
so what did you use in a book? Is it photography, your drawings? What kind of material did you use to produce it?
so it's both actually. It's photography and it's drawings, hand drawings of maps, and text. So I wrote a text, and then I had a contribution by an architect and a researcher who lives in New York, just to kind of give different or like more expert assessment or opinion of the situation there. So, by the way, if you have any questions,
yeah, you can always
you
jump
can
in.
always yes, this is exactly very informal.
I have one question, but
Yeah,
maybe
sure.
you can. I don't know if this is a good time to ask. Maybe you will explain it to your next work as well. But how do you decide, like, on the medium that you're gonna use? Because you will also show us some material that you also. I mean, those are sketches, but you were working on something. You were producing something the last few days. So how do you decide? You know, is it going to be an audio work, or is it going to be an artist book, or you know, something performative, or because you know, I mean, also for this work in New York, like. Did it happen there, or did you already know something?
I didn't know before going there what the final result would be, but the way it happened was the work that you saw before with the slide projector, that was intended to be an artist book. But once I made that work in that form, I didn't like it at all. It somehow felt, I don't know, like kind of like a fake theory book, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I read in a way, because I had so much research material. I mean, I had old photographs from the archive of the city of Skopje. I had like family photographs. I had interviews with people. I had read research. I actually had been working on that project for 3 years. So there was enough material for a book, but somehow it didn't feel like an artwork, if that makes sense. Yeah. It felt like a book. And then I thought, okay, but then anyone can make a book, you know, and like maybe, I don't know, a historian or an architect can make an even better book than this. And then I thought, what is special is the personal experience, the intimate. And that's how I kind of condensed and reduced a lot and came up with the idea for the slide. But the idea for the book, I liked it, maybe because it was something that I hadn't done before, and I had been working with photography, or like more and more working with photography. So I think it also worked in a way in Brooklyn, because the topic was about an area in transition in the city, which will definitely look very different in 6 months or 6 years. And it was about capturing this moment in time, these big contrasts that you see between poor, you know, when it's in the middle of being gentrified, when it's, you know, not there yet. When you see kind of local or old-time residents, new residents, this clashing of cultures, lifestyles, and somehow for that work it felt appropriate to make a book to kind of document and archive this moment in time, so to say. But I don't know if it's really necessarily my medium per se. It's something that I would continue to do again and again. I think it was kind of great for this work.
No, I'm just also asking because I mean, it's obvious how working with public space and project like this is completely different, you know, and it can change at any step in the process, because especially if you are doing some pre-research and then you're doing some on-site research and then in the execution and then in the production, you know, all these steps. And public space, as you said, it's not, you know, it's not something in the white cube, like, and also it's not just you that are in it. It depends, you know, on a lot of other factors. So yes, I think that's super interesting, because also like with the first work that you said that you were, you know, using the chalk, you couldn't anticipate, you know, the reactions or how it, you know, people would behave, how would that influence your work. So I just think it's interesting, you know, how to follow this process, you know, in this sort of project, like public projects, because it's really, you know, it's a working process per se, because
that's true.
It really needs to be adapted at any stage to the situation that you're finding.
That's very, very true.
Yeah.
I think what changed for me as well, because I had been working a lot with performance or performative work, ephemeral works. I maybe as I got older as well, I also wanted to have something behind, you know what I mean? Physical, yes. Not like always to be like, oh, you did it, okay, great, and you know.
I have a documentation.
Yes, but like what is and when I was working on that first work with the houses, it was actually the work. It was about. I didn't maybe mention that. Because they're this wooden prefabricated, I mean, they're not some architecture that is meant to last forever. It's ephemeral in itself. That's why the intention of the work was like to build a sort of almost an audio-visual archive monument, something for this work. It was really intended to be there to stay, and and then that translated into the book. And now I can tell you how I sort of, again, went with a very performative, experiential work, but again, with the idea that I want to leave something behind. I don't want it to be gone, you know, after the festival is over, or the exhibition, or the residency, which is something that happens very often with public artworks. And you know this because you work with this type of art, how long it takes to create it, for the artists, for the organizers, for everything, and then it's there for like, I don't know, a day, let's say, or a few hours or a week, and you know, not to say that that doesn't have impact as well, but it disappears afterwards.
Yeah, it is also super interesting, because I think it has a lot to do with the notion of how the public art is perceived, you know, because I mean, it can be still perceived as something that is made forever, you know, something in stone. I suppose you had also you know, this experience in Macedonia as well, but also while walking around the city. And of course, we're not talking now about all these projects that have, you know, been done, but when institutional works are usually, you know, stone made, or are made there forever, and are made to, you know, for people to admire, or you know, more
it's a decoration.
It's a decoration, or I don't know, like admiration to the person to whom it's like dedicated, or something like that. So it is also something that you know, that has to be really addressed, and you know, when working with this sort of project, that it is, you know, also your project, because you are public, and you can actually, even if you're not directly participating, you're still experiencing it, you know, you're coming into some sort of contact with it. So it is super interesting, because it's a kind of like discrepancy with this, what you're saying. It's there for a few hours and it disappears. That ephemeral versus something that is, you know, set in stone, made to last, you know, almost forever.
Exactly. Well, it can't, nothing can last forever, but let's say longer period.
Because I mean, if we do take, you know, this participatory approach, we can suppose that it is something that is changeable, that it's not something like you as an artist said, it would be done like this and we can leave it like that, but it's really always like kind of process behind it.
No, that's true.
So, I mean, maybe it's also a question for a little bit later when you explain the last work, because I think it can be, but just so you have in mind, maybe to let us know afterwards. Do you follow like what happens with the work afterwards? You know, like of course not if it's just a physical thing that it's exhibited or shown something, but if it's something that stays, you know, do you follow like how do people react, or what is the feedback, and do they continue to use it, or how it works?
I can tell you about that afterwards.
Yes, because I see that your next also project is an app, so
exactly. So this was a work that I did 2019 in Zurich, called Dual Reality, and it was produced specifically for actually for the first community art festival. So I mean, I had a very specific concept that I had to work with, which was to collaborate with a certain community group. And in Zurich, I actually live close to a home for visually impaired persons. And I often see them walking in the neighborhood, well, like in a few parts of the neighborhood. And with my daughter as well, who, you know, has a lot of questions. And like, you know, why do they walk here and how do they use the cane and so on. And I thought, well, these are kind of interesting questions, and I have no idea. So I decided to work with the people who live in this home, and to interview them, to try to gain their perspective of what it is like as a blind person to move around in public space. And also I went on a few walks with them to understand if they have a predetermined route, if so, what that would be. And it was a very interesting, very enriching experience, because I realized that there are so many different levels of what it means to be visually disabled, that each experience is very personal. So, you know, you can't speak to a certain level, you can speak broadly, but every experience is very personal. And I thought of making an audio guide for people who can see from the perspective of a blind person. And the idea was to download this app on your phone, which is location sensitive. It picks up your GPS from the phone, and triggers a sound at a very specific point as you walk. So, for example, you know, so it's like you hear the voice of a person that, let's say, walks with you, and this person is blind, and, you know, tells you like, oh, yeah, I know we're now at the traffic light, because, you know, I just touched it with my stick, and that has a certain sound. And then there are two other things like the fire hydrant and another pole, and they have a different sound. And then it's like, okay, why don't you pick up the stick and, you know, go back. So it's actually, the way it worked was you would walk and you would hear the experience of this person when walking. And also you would be encouraged to maybe pick up things from the street, you know, like to kind of use your other senses, use your ears, use your smell, you know, like, oh, we passed by a petrol station, like, oh, I can smell the gasoline. Or they would, let me, sorry, just show you. This is, for example, this was also one very busy tram stop, and here the person again explains like that you have to stop at a certain place on the white lines, you know, wait, close your eyes, and things like that. And also explain how you can basically also use this infrastructure that is for visually impaired and blind persons, which I think most of us don't really know how it's used. So just to give you one interesting example, the yellow box, which I see in Split as well, you know, where you can touch the button and then I think it usually produces this sound or vibration. For blind persons. I haven't checked here, but in Zurich, for example, underneath it, if you put your hand underneath it, there is an arrow that tells you where you should walk, because if you're blind, you don't know what is straight. So you kind of put your fingers underneath it and it's like, yeah, it's like an arrow, like a triangle, and you're like, ah, okay, so, you know, it's that way, it's not that way. So just
yeah, that's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Things like that, or you know, just kind of to touch things like this live fence. I mean, blunt fence. I'm not sure, but I think that this audio is in German. I will try to play it for a second. Also, so you can, so the audio guide is in bilingual. One version is in German and one version is in English, although most people heard the German version there. And it's done by an actor, so it's really, I think, sort of well played.
Ich mag den Lärm von Baustellen. Jetzt gerade unterscheiden wir uns kaum, du und ich. Keiner von uns kann das Gebäude sehen. Es existiert bloß in unserer Vorstellung.
Okay, let me just very quickly say what this is about. So at one point, the audio guide asks the audience, you know, to stop because it can hear the sound of the construction site, and basically say, you know, close your eyes, and says, oh, I love this, something like, I love the sound of construction site. Here, we are not different here because neither of us can see the building. It just exists in our imagination. And then it kind of goes on to say, like, what do you think this building could be? And so on. And then also kind of ends with this quote or explanation of a blind architect, which was also kind of part of the research, because apart from interviews, I also researched a lot about visual disability, how this blind architect basically designs buildings and encourages other architects not just to make buildings for the eyes to see, but also buildings that you can touch in a different way, you know, an atrium that you lean into, or rails that you kind of, or that help you move in a certain way. And that was kind of interesting because it made me realize, basically how much more we can learn from blind people about public space. And maybe that's something to think about integrating within urban planning. So yeah, that's a bigger topic in general. So sorry that I don't.
So this was available through an app, or?
So this wasn't available through an app, and it's an app that was already existent. It's called Voicemap. So yeah, it's a commercial app. Where I could have this this walk, and the walk is free to download. So even actually if you don't live in Zurich or pass by, you can download the app and just listen to it as a sound, as a kind of a audio play, let's say. But I used it because I really wanted to have the sound be played at the very specific place. Otherwise, you can kind of, let's say, use a QR code somewhere, and people can, you know, do it and like, okay, now it's here, let's walk. Okay, here. Whereas here, you kind of go with the flow and the thing. You don't have to do anything. You just have to download it on your phone and go for a walk, basically, and it will very clearly guide you. So, for example, before the audio guide was uploaded on this app, they kind of check it. There's like a special person there that just makes sure that the instructions are clear for the audience, you know, like you have to turn this way or that way. They check the language in English, obviously, and also in German. So, yeah. And this is just for...
Die weißen Linien hier sind sehr...
There we go. And this is the sign that is in front of the building where the all blind persons live. So it kind of tells you how you can download the app, and it shows you the route. And that's how it looks on your phone. Actually, if you're interested to also stare at your phone, you can see where you're moving along the route. So yeah, you're never like really lost. Yeah, that's and what you asked before regarding following up and so on. Yeah, so initially this idea, this work was supposed to be like, okay, for this festival, 1 week in Zurich, and then I said, no, I really want this work to be here afterwards as well. And the people liked it in this place, so they kind of ordered the sign, and yeah, they also paid a bit to this app to make it free to download, because otherwise sometimes you have to pay, I don't know, like €2 or more. So much. Actually, I think you can even, if you're interested, there is a walk-in split with this app, but it's like again about the old time, and yeah. So following up, I have done some walks with people since then, and I can always see how many people downloaded it. Sometimes people comment. But yeah, like fully like to get that one-on-one feedback, I kind of.
So what you did was actually you wrote the stories based on the interviews that you did with people, and then you had an actor who was actually performing.
Exactly. Okay. I did the version in English.
Okay.
So, we didn't have an actor for the English version. Yeah. Then he did the German version. I was like, oh yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always nice to have like a professional.
Yes, and
this thing.
I had the budget, which is not always the case, as you know, with these things. So I could just say, okay, it's nicer if I have an actor who is trained in this. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah. And now we're coming to...
Now slowly we're at the end of the night. Yeah, so exactly. So when we
started.
Yeah, exactly. So when we were first talking about Split and about tourism and guiding and so on, I thought, yeah, this could be also another place to do some kind of a guide.
Because, sorry to interrupt, but you already been to Split, but only as a tourist, right?
Yes, exactly.
So it was some time ago. So
exactly. So
you only had this experience. I remember when we
exactly the old town and the beach, and I knew about Split 3, the neighborhood. I even saw like a film about that. So I know that there has been some interest in like more recent, let's say, architecture or modernist architecture, but this was not, these buildings around here were not part of that. I felt like maybe there is a gap here to explore it. And yeah, so I have spent this week again just gathering materials, researching, trying to get a feel for the place. I've been taking pictures, as you can see, and the area is fascinating because there are so many. First of all, everything is extremely geometrical. There's a lot of repetition, kind of like, and hallways and passages, different heights. You have, like, if you can have access to go inside some of these buildings, you have like really spectacular views of the neighborhood, of the stadium, a bit of the Marian Hill and the sea. These pictures were taken from inside the building where we are now, this Kines Gizit. There was also something very intriguing for me. You have this building which is called Kines Gizit, which is Chinese wall in English. I mean, what is that? It's already very interesting. And the building stretches like a big wall. It does look like a big wall. And I don't know if this is true, but I found through my research, maybe it's like an anecdote that is not true, that the name came from one architect from Zagreb. And she took the train from Zagreb to Split. And as she was approaching, she saw from the distance the building, probably the first one over there, and said, "What is this? Kines Gizit?" It was like so big, and apparently the name stayed. I don't know if it's really true or not. That's what the legend says. But despite the size of the building from the outside, a few things are interesting. When you go in, the space is very small. So the building is kind of separated into 7 different entrances, or like imagine 7 different buildings next to each other, connected. And each functions independently with a separate entrance. And once you go in, this space inside is very small. So you have a massive building with a very small, intimate space inside. That's 1. 2, you can almost never see this entire building, like the whole wall at once. It's always covered or obstructed with something, either with different buildings, which the same architect also designed, also with the idea to, I think, obstruct a bit, like so that you don't get this feeling like, of like, oh, this is so huge. And also by using trees. And as part of the research, I found out that he built even around some of the trees, especially in the first building where that park is at the end. And the terrain is uneven. It kind of goes like this. So that's why you have columns that are longer. He could have evened it, but he was like kind of building within nature, so to say. Yeah. So I find that
we realized that when we were setting up the exhibition of the outer part, which is actually still there. And then when we were measuring, we wanted to put it on all of the same height. So we then realized that they are all different heights, so that we need to like move from. But it's really, you cannot see that.
It's like, it's really playing with dimensions. So you must be someone who can really think in a big way about space to be able to design all these buildings and all the space in between. You can't be someone that can just work with, I don't know, small space or small. So then little sketches that I made. I spent a lot of time observing the facades because they're one of the most important features of the building, and they are seemingly very simple but extremely complex because they're done in different layers. So it gives you the impression of being a flat facade, but it's actually, the topography is very, very dense, very, very detailed, and again, extremely geometrical. And it also looks different depending on the time of the day, whether it's hit by the sun or not. Then also I wrote some notes from the research, from the interviews. Yes, including some criticism. I did notice also some things that don't function so well or that could function better. We spent a long time talking about this with Jelena
Zanki.
Zanki, the professor. She's an architecture professor, an architect, and it was interesting because she has
and she's also
she lives here, but you know, she's also an expert. So we talked a lot about what works, what doesn't work, and why and how. And finally, I also spent some time doing like a very small, teeny tiny, let's say like performative actions using the existing infrastructure. So for example, I noticed a lot of stairways, a lot of passages, a lot of roads. Everything is interconnected somehow, like little almost balconies, like vistas where you could again peek like from a different angle at the facade. And I thought that's kind of interesting to explore, because if you live here, and if I would live here, I would never look at that ever. And I guess also if I didn't do this residency, I wouldn't look at it. So I thought, well, I'm here, I have the time, why not, you know, explore these seemingly mundane things, but that maybe can tell us a bit more. And things like, I don't know if you can see here, like for example, there I'm jumping because I realized that it doesn't go fully down to the ground. I don't know if that was a mistake or over time, if the ground went further down, I don't know, could be. And I felt like there was a lot of unused space that has potential for more. For example, especially in the passages of the building in between the two Kineski wall, which has like the wonderful name, Beauty Lepotica. So there's a lot of trash there, cars. There are so many cars everywhere. I don't know if I've been living too long in Switzerland. I think so. But it's like there are cars parked everywhere. And I think I spent actually a lot of time talking to, forgot the name, Anna, who was sister.
Margarita.
Exactly, about the cars, the situation with the cars, that well, the public transport doesn't work. There's like lack of parking space, and you know where it's illegal or legal to park. You know, driving being part of the culture. I mean, this is all things that you can also say about Skopje. It's like not really so different at all. But it was interesting because I think the way that the original concept was of Kotorinsk was with less cars, because parking was planned and there are designated parking areas, but obviously families grew, people started buying 2 cars per family instead of 1, and I don't know, maybe there were more buses before, maybe not, but in general the number of cars grew and people just started parking them everywhere. So for example, let's say, this side, where the north facade is, where the entrance of Prostor is, There are cars even kind of going right almost to the entrance of the building. And if you would take some of that out, you would have much more communal space.
But this is exactly what also happened to Split 3. I just rewatched the episode. It was the other day on the TV. It was already shown a couple of times. Maybe that's the one you watched, Betonski Spalači.
Ah, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was the focus on Split 3, and it was exactly what happened there. It was originally planned to have all these communal spaces in between the buildings. But what happened today, they are just used as parking slots because,
or to pass or as parking, but not with content, not with meaning, with purpose. I mean, there is here like a little square with one barbecue and the bar, and that's used quite a bit, and maybe the park, of course, is used. But there's still a little bit more that you can do, I think, just in terms of even providing more seating. I don't know, growing an urban garden or
I mean, parking is a really large issue in Split in general. I mean, it's true, and I think people would of course, there are people who would trade even more, green areas and communal spaces for more parking in that sense. So there is lobbying and things, and
it's a very slow moving process. But even the terrace at the top, the rooftop terrace, that's, I think, also not really used as I understand, which first of all, the maybe there would be amazing, but that you can also grow a garden there or have, I don't know, hammocks or something, put a barbecue and I don't know. But of course, it's the question: who's going to do it? Who will maintain it? How often? And is it safe to go up there? And million things.
I mean, we are happy that at least this space, I mean, it's a private space, but at least it can serve to a wider public in some way.
Absolutely.
So this is what we are also aiming for. But
I mean, you're already working on some of these topics here, recycling. You did something with plants. I mean, you are touching on these questions of community space, public space, community life, and that's great.
It's just part of the process.
Well, you're starting the process, so that's great.
We're trying. So what will happen now? What's the next point? And this is something that we also need to still discuss, because we also left it a little bit open-ended, and we'll see how we're actually gonna produce the final work. So what are your ideas at this point now?
So I have been changing my mind constantly.
And it hasn't been a lot of days.
It hasn't been a lot of days, but it's a rich experience, and then you learn something new, you get a new idea. So I guess once I go back home and some time passes and I go through all my notes and things will be more clear. But so far the direction I'm going would still be to do some kind of walk around, and I am still mainly interested in I know the area is bigger, but I am mainly interested in these 6 buildings that Gotovac designed, because I think they communicate in a very interesting way with each other, and they provide well, first of all, there are some example of a modernist architecture, and again, the whole question of what do we do with this kind of architecture, and it's not protected, but it's kind of like falling apart. Is it valuable? Is it not valuable? Like that's kind of another, should it be a landmark or not?
Yeah. Do you also plan to use a sort of like movement as a tool or as a method to kind of integrate in these works?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, some kind of walk movement which will allow the audience to experience the space in a different or new way. Maybe allow them to learn something, something new, or like give them some ideas. How exactly it will be done technically is something I have to test. Basically, when working with these apps, with the GPS, like where is the signal good, especially if you work with high-rise buildings, that's something you have to kind of try on the spot. And there are different options to do things.
Well, we will see how it goes. And also one thing that is for sure that it will remain, a finished product will not remain a work in progress, but in that sense that we can do always a follow-up because it would be something that is part of our space in a sense, like like a starting point at least. So we
exactly. This was also something that I really loved, the idea that you're here already integrated, part of this building, this neighborhood. So it can even just be something that you come and listen to here. I don't know, but you know, there is
but a way to kind of like experience more of the urban environment that people who come here are actually positioned in.
Yes, so, and just to add something, sorry, when we were talking about tourism, that was interesting. That came from an interview the other day, or like a conversation, when we talked about that this being kind of a gap that many people come to visit when they come to Split, but actually in a lot of these apartments, a lot of these are apartments for rent, for tourists. So there are tourists here, well, during the season, not right now.
Definitely, because we are still close to the center, you know, it's a really good place to be located. So there are many Airbnb, there are not so many hotels, and you know, but there are Airbnbs, apartments for rent. And also it was it's close to the stadium, and also a place where there was this huge festival happening throughout the years. So a lot of people actually started to rent their apartments when that happened here. And then, I mean, it's a really good location also, not just to live in, but also for tourists, because it's close to everything. So we are sure that we can actually also use this potential to kind of like also shift kind of like a mindset and focus. Great. So, but I think the follow-up thing would be definitely part of it, because we can actually see how people would react. We can talk to them, and I don't know, maybe do something more with that work while it's done. But this we'll see. This we will see how it happens.
Part 2.
Yes. Okay. Do we have any questions? Online? No.
Or online?
You said it all.
We said everything. Okay, but we will remain open to like any contribution. Anyone who wants to like still contribute to this work, just feel free to email us or contact us on social networks, or also you. So thank you, Verica, for being here.
Thank you.
We hope it was a pleasant stay, and we hope to host you again. Maybe soon. And we're really looking forward to see how the progress will be done, and we will of course do do all the announcements about that. So thank you once again, and thanks to everyone. We are getting close also to the end of this year's project, Void. So we still have 1 week on with final intervention next weekend by Blanka Kicsák. So well, good night,
Stay
everyone.
tuned.
And stay tuned. Yeah.